Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arnie Adam. I'm postdoc at the University of Queensland. And in the spirit of sharing, I'm from Belgium, and one of my earliest memories is going to the coastline, which is only 65 kilometer long, no less, and just with a little bucket and with a net collecting crabs and little critters under piers, and then unfortunately taking them home and put them in a freshwater pond and see how they thrive. And that's where the scientific curiosity, like why did that happen, was actually born. So back to the science today. I will showcase how the context of restoration impacts restoration benefits. So during the symposium, we have seen many examples of how important it is to take action in rebuilding the resilience of coral reefs on the Great Barrier Reef. And this is particularly important as the counterfactual model results, which are the scenarios where we don't do any intervention at all, are predicting that a stark decline in coral cover percentage over time. And this is especially apparent in the two most likely examples, scenarios. These results were produced by my colleague Yves-Marie Bozec. And thereby ecological models form powerful tools to investigate how interventions can benefit the recovery of coral reefs on the GBR under future climate conditions. And over the years, the team at UQ has developed and refined the ecological model ReefMod, which is an individual-based model that simulates the settlement and growth and mortality of individual corals when demographic processes, ecological interactions, but also acute disturbances are having an effect on those individual corals. So cyclones, bleaching events, water quality. So it's quite a powerful model to track the growth of corals under quite realistic scenarios. And these are exactly the models that we use for the interventions as well. And this is an example of how it looks, how a model output actually looks like. On this graph, on the y-axis, you see the mean total coral cover. On the x-axis, you see the time post-deployment. So you see that green star, that is the time point when a restoration was set up in the model. And the different types of line show you an example of intervention scenarios with different external larval supply, low or high larval supply. And the blue lines, the red lines represent the counterfactual, so without intervention, while the blue lines represent the coral cover for the intervention run. So what we are actually interested in is the space between the counterfactual and the intervention, which is the benefits. So that shows us how successful our restoration was under a particular setting in our model. So I have shown you an example of just one intervention scenario, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of uncertainty of like where do we intervene, when do we intervene, and what strategy will we actually use at a given moment. But on top of that, it's also important to consider that restoration benefits are context dependent. And in this study, I'm focused mainly on three pillars of context. The first one is the context of reef states. Thereby, we are interested in what was the reef state before we started the intervention. What was the coral cover, the size distribution, the species composition. That's all important information and will highly influence restoration benefits, as well as recruitment rate. For example, if there's low recruitment rates on a reef and you dump a lot of corals on it, the benefit will be high because that's the only source of external only source of corals coming in. The second context is the context of restoration design. And that's where, for example, if we focus on coral outplanting, what is the percentage of area that you actually target for restoration? What is the density that you outplanting corals? What is the heat tolerance of your outplanted corals? So for example, if you're focusing your effort across a bigger area, on a bigger area, and the restoration benefits will be lower compared if you focus on a smaller area but with a higher density. So you have to take that into account, that will eventually affect your benefits over time. And then we have the third aspect, the third context is the timing of a disturbance. So when a disturbance occurs will highly affect restoration benefits. Because when a disturbance occurs later, the impact of a disturbance could set back restoration benefits and actually neutralize the value of restoration success. So this is how our setup, this is a simplified graph of how the setup of our interventions look like. So basically we use ReefMod to simulate the interventions conducted on a virtual reef, but using parameters that are specific to the reef, to the GBR. Why do we use a virtual reef? That allows us to parameterize almost anything that we want. Basically, ecological parameters, environmental, also connectivity, demographics. We can optimize everything and see how the restoration benefit changes under specific intervention. We have almost a blank slate and we can control what is happening on that reef over time. So when the first thing we want to do is to investigate the context of reef states and also the context of restoration design. What we do is we will parameterize intervention scenarios without any disturbances. And that allows us to screen a whole range of ecological, environmental, connectivity-related and demographic settings. For connectivity, we use two specific metrics to present connectivity, which is external larval supply and also self-retention. Self-retention is what the proportion of larvae retained on a reef. And then for the restoration strategy, we actually focus on coral outplanting and use different settings of what the area is we restore on, the density, and also the thermal tolerance. And what we then do is we screen for every time point. So we have a whole bunch of intervention scenarios. And for every time point, all the numbers that you see post-deployment, we extract certain data. For example, the time when the time post-deployment when we record the data. Then also, what was the benefit recorded at that time point? The external larval supply, self-retention, the coral cover, the year before the coral cover, the year before the restoration happened. Then also species composition, what was the size distribution for that specific scenario, sedimentation, that's a measurement for water quality, the stocking density of that intervention, the proportion of reef restored, and for those scenarios, in the absence of disturbances, that already gives us about 25,000 unique intervention scenarios. If you want to investigate the context of disturbances, and also heat loss, the context of disturbances, that what we do is we fix all the ecological settings and also restoration strategies, but then we change the time point when a disturbance occurs within the time frame post deployment. So we actually have various interventions screening what will happen with the benefits if a cyclone occurs, for example, 8 years post deployment. And what we record is for those metrics is what is the year when a bleaching or a cyclone occurred and the number of bleaching events. For this study, we focus only on one disturbance. So either a cyclone event of magnitude 2 or a bleaching event of 8-degree heating weeks, just to keep it as simple as possible and to be able to extract the relevant data. And with the disturbances, that gives us about 360,000 unique scenarios. So if you start thinking of building up different scenarios, more settings, you will easily end up in the millions. Okay. And okay. And so once we have extracted all this data for every time point post-deployment, we integrate that in a random forest model and run that model to evaluate what are the most important drivers that of restoration success. What are the drivers that impact restoration benefits the most? And this is one of the results when we focus on the context of restoration design and the state of the reef in the absence of a disturbance. So this is the result of when, this is a partial dependency plot where we actually, of all those 9 variables, we select every variable in isolation while keeping the remainder variables at mean values. And what we see is that external larval supply is quite important. You see that over time, so the y-axis is the coral cover benefit that was predicted. The x-axis is years post-deployment. So we see at when the larval supply is low, the coral cover benefit is ramping up quite fast. And we also see that self-retention is really important. With variable interaction, with variable patterns between small, medium, or large levels of retention on the reef. And thirdly, species composition is really important as well. When we add disturbances in the mix, I want you to focus on the red lines. That's where the year of a cyclone occurring and bleaching event occurring is really important as well. So apart from the connectivity related variables, the disturbances are really important. What I want then, if we go into more detail, we see that, for example, this graph shows you what the benefit is 1 year after a bleaching event or a cyclone event has occurred. So the purple star gives you an example. So if a cyclone has occurred at year 10, the benefit you see at year 11 is about 16%. So what you see that it's ramping up, so the more time that has passed, so the more that the reef has time to recover, then is when you see a large difference in benefit over time. And that drops over time because the counterfactual and intervention run is getting close to each other over time. And for bleaching, on the other hand, we see a higher benefit, and that is mainly caused by the added benefits of heat-tolerant corals. So that was only one time point. This shows you a heat map of every time point, basically. So just the purple star is an indication of what it actually means. So every red box is when a bleaching event has occurred. So all the data before, on the left, is before a disturbance has happened. Everything after, so the green arrow is all the benefits that is occurring after a bleaching event occurs. So basically, the takeaway message of this plot is within 3 years, you actually have basically a recovery of benefits benefits over time. I'm almost there. So, in conclusion, connectivity variables, species composition, and the timing of disturbances are really important drivers of restoration success. The benefits increase over time of disturbance occurring post-deployment. benefits are higher when a bleaching event occurs compared to a cyclone event. With enough recovery time, the reef can recover relatively quickly. What is next? So this is, we know that these are really simplified scenarios. You will never have a scenario where you only have one disturbance and then 10 years nothing. So we will increase the complexity of the model, but this study actually allowed us to investigate, okay, what are the key parameter variables to focus on in our models and investigate further. And we need to reevaluate these drivers under more complex model scenarios. And then we will use a Bayesian belief network to holistically analyze informed intervention scenarios. Thank you very much. Sorry.